Hi, so I just had an article published in Méthexis, the International Journal of Ancient Philosophy, called Proclus on the Direct Knowledge of the Forms. And you can find a link below. And I wanted to tell you all about a bit what it is. So the research behind this article, which just came out now in 2025, goes back actually to my PhD, right, which I finished in 2017, so like almost 8 years ago. And in my PhD, I ended up writing a lot more than went into my book, Time's Causal Power, which came out in 2021, which is about how Proclus conceives of time. And in the book, I end up on a kind of a cliffhanger, on a tension that exists in Proclus's thought, which is that on the one hand, Proclus thinks that time is homogeneous, so it goes by and every moment is just like every other moment. It's just this constant flow of now, 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 now. And on the other hand, he also thinks that each moment has its own distinct character, such that sometimes it's the right time to do some things and sometimes it's the wrong time to do such things. Right? This originally goes back to a biological metaphor, right? So like for a given animal, there's a certain time for it to be born, a time for it to go to sleep, a time for its horns to grow, a time for it to have children, a time for it to grow old, and so on. But, so extending this biological idea to everything, you get this idea that each moment of time has its own proper activities and its own proper things not to do. So there is a question of how do you reconcile this differentiated view of time with a homogeneous view? The homogeneous view is important if you're going to say that time measures things, and that's really crucial for Proclus. So how does he bring these two together? I just leave the end of the book with that tension, and specifically that tension in Proclus is about the cognitive life of the world soul. So for Proclus, he expands the biological metaphor because he thinks that the whole world is a single living being. And he thinks that the flow of time is actually the thoughts or the knowledge, the insights that this living being, which is a divine living being, is having, right? So it's having, right now, it's having an insight into what beauty is, having an insight into what justice is, having an insight into what horses are. At every moment, the life of this world is engaged in visualizing and projecting some kind of universal reality, right? And so at the same time, however, that this life is differentiated and it's thinking different things, it's also supposed to be completely uniform, this life completely at peace, right? So it's not like it has a choice. Oh, will I think now of beauty or will I think now of wisdom? No, rather, it's always just engaged in the same thing, thinking the same thing. If you want a somewhat more plastic image of this, you can think of it as tripping. And the trip is both at one and the same time. It's always thinking there is only one thing, there is only one thing. It's all one, man. And at the same time, it's having these very distinct plastic visions, right? So how do you reconcile a uniform cognitive life with one that's distinct into these distinct epiphanies or insights that it's having? And I went into this, especially in the 6th chapter of my dissertation that didn't make it into the book, which was then an investigation to how does the life of the world know things. And this involved going into some matters, more general matters in Proclus epistemology, like how do we know the forms? And that's what's made it into this article. So here I argue and I explain how for Proclus, it is possible for human beings in rare moments of divine inspiration to directly know the forms, that is, the universal realities that shape the world, right? It's like things like universal beauty and universal justice and things like that. And so that's the core of this paper. It's about showing how this cognitive activity actually involves what's also known as the one of the soul, which doesn't need to be, doesn't need to be anything scary. Sometimes people think, ooh, it's this thing whereby we unite with the one, and then they think it's like the mystical and they can't understand it. Proclus has some passages where, he's more concrete about it, and we can use those to also understand how forms can make themselves known to us. And so I go into the questions about what is the one of the soul, and what are the so-called Chaldean virtues, what's the difference between a form and a token in Proclus. And so I bring all these things into an account of how we can directly know the forms. I've explored these issues more, and also in a course of mine. That was my second course on Time and the Gods in Proclus, and there I really laid out my whole interpretation of how Proclus thinks that the world soul knows the forms, and therefore has both at once a simple uniform life and also a diverse life. The key to this is that it's what it actually knows, or what's called its form numbers. And I hope to have something coming out about that also soon. Thanks. Hope you enjoy the article. Feel free to write to me.